Welcome to Earthtide Studios. I'm Zach Knight, and in today's video we're going to be looking at how to mix synths in pop music. There's many different sounds, styles and articulations that you can use in your pop productions, and in this video we're going to be looking at the track Burning House by the artist Cole that I produced last year. There was a lot of different layering and sounds that we used during the production of this song, and the vocals were really fun to explore. We actually have a free vocal production course that teaches the basics of recording, editing, and mixing your vocals. So if you want that, just click the link below. But for now, let's burn that house down. We're in the session in Cubase. I'm just going to first break down what we've got going on here in the production for the synths. As you can see, there's quite a lot going on here, and realistically, you'll notice that depending upon what section of the song, so we've got the intro here, the first verse, then we've got the pre-chorus and then the chorus, and then it continues on from there. Depending upon the section, the production elements come in and out across the song. And in some places, for instance, this music box here, they actually only happen once. The reason that is because you want to make sure you have got, some dynamics in the song, different parts playing their role. You might have one instrument doing one melody, and then later on that same melody will repeat, but it's going to be done on a different instrument or a different element of the mix. Basically, we've got all these different parts here, and generally speaking, most of these are as is from the production session, and most of the mixing I've done inside this mix. This is a little different to the way that I treated the synths that I did on a previous video where I showed how I mixed synths for heavy music, where I did a lot of the processing beforehand. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start to delve through each of these individual tracks and have a look at how we've approached the EQ for these. So we're going to have a look at how we've processed the EQ and a bit of saturation here on these synths. And first up, we're going to check out what we've got going on here with this music box pluck. Now, this happens for the second half of the first verse, and we'll have a listen to it with no processing and context with the rest of the mix first. It's pretty cool sounding, but it's definitely got a little bit too much edge to it, and it really needs to sit a little bit nicer with the rest of the mix. So the first thing that I've done is I've actually running Sound Toys Decapitator here, saturating it a bit here, not too hard. The drive's at 2.9 and the mix is sitting just over 50%. Let's have a listen. Definitely helping it poke a little bit more, but also rounding out some of that harshness that's happening sort of in the mid and high range of that there. Further along, I'm doing some EQ here with FabFilter Pro Q2. We're rolling off the low end at 12 dB, 92 Hertz here, and I'm also dealing with a notch here at 477 Hertz, and also just a sort of a bit of a wider bell rolling to remove some of that higher mid-range and the lower high end as well. So let's just turn them off one and at a time and have a listen to what's going on here. So we'll start with the low cut. Definitely just helping deal with any of the unneeded low end that we have there in that synth. And now we're just going to check out what's going on here with this notch. Have a listen to what's going on here with this removal of the sort of upper mid-range here with this wide bell. Definitely making quite a big difference there. So next up, I'm going to have a look at what we've got going on here for this other pluck, the Dream Killer pluck that's happening in this second part of the first verse and the pre-chorus, as well as the chorus as well. So as you can tell, it's been processed to sound quite ambient, and it's got a whole bunch of really sort of cool vibes going on there. Let's listen to what it sounded like with no processing first. So I do note that I did print a little bit of reverb on this one during the production session, but otherwise there's not been any processing going on there. So first up in the chain, I'm running FabFilter Pro Q2, and I'm rolling off the low end pretty hard here, 24 dB an octave at 150 Hertz. Let's have a listen. So that's just getting rid of any unwanted low end there in that synth because we don't need it there. And then I'm running Soothe too. And what I'm doing here is I'm just getting rid of some of those resonant peaks, but I'm doing it dynamically because Soothe is really good to do that. Soothe is a really good way to be able to help deal with any dynamic peaks that you've got going on in your synths. And you can definitely be, you know, a little bit subtle with it, or you can be quite heavy-handed depending upon the part. The other thing that I'm doing with this synth is I'm doing a little bit of limiting as well, just because there's a few peaks going on that I want to control. So you can see that the attenuation is really not too hard on that one. So we're also going to have a look at the low stabs that start off the track here and also happened in the second verse. Let's listen to what they sound like on their own currently. So the main thing that I want to note that I've done here is we've got a bit of EQ here happening with FabFilter Pro Q2 rolling off the low end there at 30 Hertz and the high end there at 9,100 Hertz as well. This one's 36 dB an octave and this one's 24 dB an octave. Let's listen to what it sounds like with those on and off in context. Not doing too much there, but just really helping to control any of the unnecessary frequencies there. Now, I also have these reverse stabs here, which is basically just a reverse of these plucks that's coming in here. And I'll just play what they sound like this is in the second verse, and you'll just have a listen to what they sound like, and then I'm going to show you the processing on them. So what I've done with these is I've really filtered them. So we've got a low cut here at 260 Hertz and a high cut here at 2100 Hertz. This one's 18 dB an octave and this one's 30 dB an octave. And the main point of this is basically I want to try and control what's going on here with these because there's a lot of reverb. I don't want them clouding up that stereo space. So at, you know, the low end and the high end as well. So that's why I've got that going on here. Let's just have a listen. Just really helping to control the low end there and the high end there of those synths. Now, generally speaking, I'm doing the majority of a similar thing along most of these synths here. We've got, you know, saturation to EQ or EQ to saturation, but I'm just going to show these chords here for this music box at the end of the song in the final chorus. And then I'll just break down what's going on with the saturation and EQ on these here. So I'll just turn off all of the processing happening on those. And you'll see that we're starting off with Decapitator here. And I've got this one saturation running just under 3. The mix is 100% wet and I've got it on the A preset here. Just basically adding a little bit of saturation here with Decapitator. Just really helping that sound a little bit sort of smoother, but also poke a little bit more as well. Next up, we're going pretty hard here with Camel Crusher. and I've pushed the compression pretty far on this, and otherwise I'm not really doing anything with the distortion or the filter here. And it's 100% mixed. Let's have a listen to what it's doing. So it's just really helping to make it sound a little bit sort of less pokey and a bit smoother, but also really quite pushing, obviously, that pluck to be a little bit more focused out with the rest of the mix as well. Following from that, I'm running FabFilter Pro Q2 again here, and we're rolling off the low end at 140 Hertz here, 30 dB an octave, and the high end here at 12.5K, 36 dB an octave, and we're also removing a bit of the upper mid-range here, just with a sort of a wide bell here, focusing at around 3600 Hertz. Let's just listen to what it sounds like with this EQ on and then off. Just really helping to control that unnecessary low end there and smooth it out a little bit. Finally, we're running the Waves L1 limiter here, just attenuating to control any of the peaks. Sounds very nice. So I'm going to play this final chorus here, and we're just going to have a listen to how everything sounds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and basically turn on and off all of the saturation that's happening for this whole last section. And you can hear how it's really helping all of the pads sound a lot nicer and helping the synths, just in, the plucks and the synths just generally have a little bit more life. So this is everything as it is currently. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to go through and I'll turn off all of the saturation that we've got running on each of these different pads. Let's just have a listen to what it sounds like now. Definitely loses a lot of life. It obviously loses, a lot of that poke and that smoothness as well. So it's a really important thing that you do make sure that you treat each of your different synths, your pads and your plucks and whatever else you're choosing to use in your songs, just with, a little bit of care for each different part. Give each different part its own place. Obviously, I've got different EQ going on some of these plucks versus some of the other ones. Some are sort of focusing more, sitting in the mid-range. Some of them are sitting a little bit lower on the scale. Some are sitting a little bit higher. But I'm just making sure that there's a place for each different part that belongs there. So lastly, I'm just going to have a look at what we've got going on here for the effects on these different synths. So in general, across this whole track, most of the processing that I'm doing in terms of effects is just a little bit of reverb and a little bit of chorus on these synths. And I'm using my favorite reverb plugin, Black Hole, here for this ambient pluck. This is Black Hole by Earthtide. I've used this on videos before. Feel free to take this preset and use it for yourself. And I'm also rolling off the low end and the high end here on the reverb, just because it's really, quite full on. Let's have a listen to this pluck with and without Black Hole, just so that you can hear what it's doing. As you can tell, it's a pretty awesome ambient reverb, and so it's really giving it a lot more space there. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm actually running a chorus here on these music box chords that are happening at the end of the track. And I'm actually using little microshift here. This is a fantastic chorus to give you a little bit more stereo space for whatever you're choosing to push through it. I'm also doing what I love to do with this plugin as well, which is roll off the low end, do a little of a high shelf, actually bringing it down by 8 dB here, and then do another high cut here at 12K to deal with some of the weirdness that happens with little micro shift. And let's have a listen to what it's actually doing now. All these music box chords, and I'll start it with it on, and then we'll turn it off, and you'll notice how it really just spreads it out a little bit more. Just gives it a little bit more spread and helps it sit out a little bit more. And finally, on the bus for all of the synths, I'm running Soothe 2, and I'm just using this to help deal with any unnecessary peaks. I'm going pretty hard on the sharpness and the selectivity. Let's see what it's doing. Really dealing with a lot of those sort of harsh peaks that is happening, especially there in those brass pads. Just a much easier way to be able to save on CPU by processing it on the bus there. And I'm also running Waves L1 limiter on the bus here as well, just attenuating a couple of the peaks that are happening there to make sure that these synths are all sitting nice and even in the mix. So there you go. Quite a lot of different things going on with this song, but the actual mixing itself is quite straightforward, and it's really not going to be too hard for you to be able to implement some of these techniques in your productions. But I'd really love to hear what you've been enjoying lately. Pop a comment below with your favorite pop banger that you've been listening to lately, and I'll give it a spin. Don't forget about that free vocal production course. Hit the subscribe button if you want to get these weekly tutorials, but for now, take it easy.
To bring